The sound of engines revving didn't belong on a crosswalk, not on a warm Saturday afternoon, not in front of the old strip mall on 12th and Rosewood, where families still bought bread and where the paint on the pedestrian lines was sun-faded but respected by most. But today they came. 6 chrome-plated motorcycles, blacked-out helmets, sleeveless cuts with worn patches. Their laughter came first like gravel in a blender, coarse and taunting. Then the bikes rolling in as if the world owed them silence and space. They stopped right across the pedestrian crosswalk, blocking both lanes, intentionally, casually. People watched but said nothing. A mother pulling her toddler close, a retired vet shaking his head from the bus bench but staying seated. Eyes averted, like the heat of the Texas sun might somehow burn less than confrontation. Then came her, brown hair tucked under a navy cap, stepped steady small paper bag in one hand, breaded tomato and a little jar of peanut butter poking through. She wasn't flashy, didn't stand out until you saw the way she walked. Shoulders back, eyes calm, straight down the white crosswalk toward the line of bikes. The largest of the bikers, a man with arms like tree trunks and a sneer to match, watched her approach. He nudged his friend. "Look at this one," he grunted. "Someone's in a hurry." Another chuckled. "Maybe she's lost." She wasn't. As she approached the first bike, she didn't slow. Her boots hit each painted line with deliberate rhythm. The heat of the engines shimmered in the air. Still, she didn't flinch. The big biker swung a leg over his machine, standing directly in her path, towering, blocking. The sidewalk behind him remained wide open, but she didn't alter course. That's when his smile turned ugly. "You deaf or just stupid?" he growled loud enough for the nearby families to hear. "Go around." She paused not because of fear, but because she'd reached her mark. Her eyes met his. Cool, measuring. She looked down just slightly at the patch on his vest, a skull gripping a dagger in its teeth. Then she lifted her chin just enough for sunlight to catch the side of her neck. There, just below a faint scar, was the unmistakable outline of a tattoo, a Navy SEAL Trident. Real, earned. He noticed it and the smugness flickered. "You think that scares me?" He scoffed louder now, trying to save face in front of the others. "Lady, we don't care about some tattoo." She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Behind her, a truck slowed, watching. The mother with the toddler stared uncertain, but the woman said nothing, just stared at him like she was giving him one last out. The moment hung quiet and thick, like the seconds before a storm. He stepped forward, too close. Big mistake. Her bag of groceries dropped softly to the ground. Her right hand rose fast, caught his wrist in mid-motion, twisted and dropped him like a sack of bricks. He hit the asphalt hard, gasping, his arm bent back in a lock, so precise it didn't even look violent until he screamed. The other bikers rose, but none stepped forward. Not yet. Her voice when it came was low, controlled, with the kind of calm that only comes from seeing too much. "You've got 10 seconds to move your bikes." The one on the ground writhed. The others hesitated. Then a new sound cut through the heat. Rotors. Helicopter blades, faint but growing, slicing the air like a warning from above. 2 Blackhawks coming in low. And that's when the crowd realized this wasn't over. Not even close. Emma Grayson didn't need backup, but she had it. The 2 Blackhawks weren't for her. Not directly. They were part of a local training exercise, coincidence and timing. But the sound of them approaching sent a ripple through the crowd. A wave of implication, of possibility. The bikers looked up, faces paling. The man on the ground whimpered something, but Emma was already standing, already letting him go. She didn't gloat, didn't speak again. She picked up her grocery bag, now slightly crushed, and walked to the other side of the crosswalk, leaving the roar of retreating engines behind her. The moment passed, but not for her. 2 hours earlier, Emma had been standing barefoot in her kitchen, slicing a tomato. Her condo was modest, neat. A rack of weights in the corner. A photo on the fridge, her with her father, Walter Grayson, 25 years Navy SEAL Team 5. The kind of man who didn't speak unless it mattered. who raised her to know the difference between fear and danger, and when to stand your ground. She wasn't supposed to be back in Texas yet. Her deployment had ended 6 months ago, but the transition wasn't smooth. You can leave a battlefield, but the battlefield doesn't always leave you. She'd kept her return quiet. No parade, no announcements, just space. Today had been about something simple. Bread, a tomato, a walk in the sun. She'd even left her car behind, wanting to feel her boots on the pavement, wanting to feel normal. But normal hadn't waited, and neither had memory. Kef sur mum, sur mein père. After the incident, Emma ducked into a side alley behind the butcher's shop, not hiding, just pausing, letting her breath settle, not from fear, but from the weight of being seen again. She leaned back against the warm brick and looked at her hand. It hadn't trembled. That was new. 6 months ago it might have. 3 months ago it definitely would have. But today it didn't. That meant something. At the edge of town, a small sheriff's cruiser slowed as it approached the strip mall. Deputy Collins stepped out, sunglasses low on his nose. He'd heard the call disturbance, loud engines, something about a fight. But by the time he arrived, the only thing left was silence. That and a cashier who kept pointing to the crosswalk. Said some woman took down Jesse Doolin. The cashier muttered, half impressed, half terrified. Collins raised an eyebrow. Jesse Doolin was 6'4" and meaner than a desert snake on a hot day. A woman, huh? Not just any woman, the cashier added. She didn't say a word. She just moved. That stayed with him. Mom. Back in her condo, Emma placed the bread on the counter, wiped the tomato clean, and poured herself a glass of water. She stood at the window overlooking the quiet street. She wasn't angry, not exactly. It was something else, something deeper. Because it wasn't about motorcycles or men who needed to be loud to feel big. It was about how quickly silence was mistaken for weakness. About how people had stopped expecting anyone, especially women like her, to push back. But the thing was, she didn't need them to expect it. She just needed them to understand it after. That evening, her father called. I heard he said simply, "No, how are you? No, welcome home." Just that. Emma smiled faintly. You always do. There was a pause, then, "You okay?" "I'm good," she said. Didn't break anything important. Just a little ego. He grunted, the sound of a proud man who wouldn't say it out loud. Then softer. "You ever gonna come back to the team?" Emma didn't answer right away. Her eyes traced the fading sunset through the blinds. "I think I'm already on my next mission," she said. Another pause, this time longer. "I'll be here," he said finally. Then he hung up. In a bar just outside of town, Jesse Doolin nursed a bruised arm and a bruised ego. His buddies were quiet now, unsure of how to rewrite the story to make him the hero. No one had stepped in, no one had helped him. They'd seen her eyes, they'd seen her control, and they'd seen the trident. That was what haunted them, not the strength, the silence. By nightfall, Emma pulled her hair back into a braid and laced up her boots again. Not for battle, for walking. Because the world didn't need another warrior in camouflage. It needed someone who knew when not to strike and when to. And if tomorrow brought another line in the sand, another crosswalk blocked, she'd be ready. Without a word, Emma didn't want to be a legend. She wanted groceries, a quiet day, a clean sunrise. But stories have a way of running faster than truth, and by the next morning her name had already made it halfway across town. Not shouted, not posted, just whispered, like a ghost returning to the living. At the gas station, 2 teenagers were replaying the incident. One claimed he saw her take Jesse down with a single move. The other insisted she'd knocked out 2 guys at once. Neither version was true. But Emma knew better than to correct a myth once it started growing. At O'Hara's auto shop, a man named Vince leaned under the hood of a dusty old truck when the sheriff's cruiser rolled in. Deputy Collins stepped out slow and careful. "You know that woman who put Jesse on the pavement?" he asked. Vince wiped his hands with a rag, then grinned. "You mean Grayson's kid?" Collins raised a brow. She's been gone a long time, Vince continued, his voice suddenly more respectful. Didn't think she'd come back. Neither did Jesse, I imagine. Collins didn't smile. Listen, I'm not asking her to join the department or anything, but if she's sticking around, Vince nodded. I get it. You just want to know which side of the road she's walking on. Collins gave him a long look. And what she might do when it's blocked. Emma was at the gym. Not the one with mirrors and Zumba, the old one. No air conditioning, no music, just iron and chalk. She moved through her routine like a ceremony, push-ups, weighted lunges, deadlifts. Not a single grunt, not a sound. Just motion. An older man watched from the bench, pressed towel around his neck. He recognized the tattoo, the poise. You Grayson's daughter, he asked quietly. She nodded once. He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. He simply said, glad you're home, and turned back to his bench. It wasn't about hero worship. It wasn't fear. It was understanding. Urayentin. Later at the town diner, the waitress didn't charge her for the coffee. Emma left the full tip anyway and walked out with the same steady stride she always had. But the booth behind her murmured, did you hear she was one of the first women on SEAL Team 4? Thought they didn't let women in. They do now, especially ones like her. Someone else whispered she could have killed him. But she didn't. That was what stayed. Emma sat on her porch that night, watching the streetlights blink on one by one. A car rolled by slow, not suspicious, just cautious. She didn't turn her head. Didn't need to. She knew what they were wondering. Why she was here, what she wanted, what she might do next. But Emma didn't move to prove anything to anyone. Not anymore. Let them guess. Let the whispers do what they always do. She had her mission, and it wasn't vengeance. It was recovery. Mom. But not everyone took her return as a quiet thing. Jesse Doolin, sore in pride and shoulder, hadn't left town. He'd gone to his older brother Cal Doolin, a man with more money and meaner friends. She humiliated me, Jesse said, eyes burning. She made me look like a punk. Cal leaned back in his leather chair, fingers tapping a glass of bourbon. No, he said coolly, you did that to yourself. I want payback. Cal looked at him long and slow. She's not just some girl, she's a SEAL. Jesse swallowed. I don't care. That's your first mistake. The next day, Emma walked past the hardware store when she saw something out of place. A red motorcycle helmet cracked on one side, resting quietly beside the trash can. She didn't stop, didn't flinch. But she saw it, and she understood. The town was watching her, and someone had started marking territory. It wasn't intimidation. It was invitation. To play a game she thought she'd left behind. Emma were never in Marine. That night, Emma called no one. Not her father, not the sheriff. She walked into her garage and opened the old footlocker at the back. Inside a folded uniform, a laminated photo, a small velvet box, and beneath them all, her boots. She laced them without ceremony, without music. Outside, the wind picked up. Storms were coming in the next few days, but she wasn't preparing for weather. She was preparing for consequence. The first storm hit on a Thursday. It wasn't rain that came down, not yet, but tension. Heavy, slow, rolling in like thunder across an open plain. It started with bikes. Not just Jesse's crowd anymore. This was bigger, more organized. Men with matching patches, newer engines, quieter pipes, the kind that cost money, not scrap. They didn't roar through town, they crept. 3 circled the diner. 2 lingered outside the high school. Another parked just far enough from Emma's house to not be illegal, but close enough to be noticed. She saw them, all of them. Didn't flinch, didn't call anyone. But she made a trip, not to the police, not to a lawyer, to the elementary school. Principal Karen Miles hadn't changed in 20 years. Still wore floral blouses and half-moon glasses. Still greeted every child by name. She looked up when Emma stepped into her office. Emma Grayson, she whispered, standing. I heard you were back. Emma nodded. I need a favor. Karen sat down. Say the word. There's a little girl named Lily, 8 years old. Walks home alone most days. Karen's brows lifted. You know her. Emma hesitated. Not yet, but I will. Karen said nothing for a long beat. Then we'll make sure she's walked home by a staff member. No exceptions. Emma's nod was slow, grateful. Thank you. As she left, a janitor at the end of the hall paused and tipped his head. Word travels fast in small towns. Faster when the quiet ones speak. And not some. That night, the bikers parked 5 deep outside the bar. Laughter spilled into the street, loud and forced. Someone shouted something about seals, something crude. Emma passed them on her way to the store. They parted like water. Not out of fear, but calculation. She wasn't scared. That bothered them. Jesse watched from the porch, nursing a shoulder still wrapped under denim. He didn't speak this time, just glared. His older brother Cal leaned against a car hood, arms folded. You're making ripples, he said as Emma passed. She stopped, turned her head slightly. Cal smiled. You sure you're not looking to make waves? Emma's eyes met his. Then she walked away. That was answer enough. Sheriff Collins found her sitting outside the bakery the next morning, black coffee cooling in her hand. They're poking the bear, he said, no small talk. Emma didn't answer. He pulled up a chair. I can deputize you, just for a few days. Not official, but it might make them think twice. I don't want a badge, she said. I know. It'll beat. You waiting for something, he asked. Emma looked down the road. They are. Collins followed her gaze to where a group of kids were crossing the intersection. Lily among them. One of the bikers revved his engine just as the kids reached the crosswalk. Emma stood before the sound fully faded. She crossed the street before Collins could say another word. And she stood there, right in the middle of the white-painted lines, her back to the kids, her face to the engines. She didn't say a word. The biker stared. Rev it again. Emma didn't flinch. Another engine started, then another. Then silence. They backed away. Not because they were scared of a woman, but because they finally understood what she was. Not rage. Not revenge. Discipline. The sun dropped behind thick clouds by late afternoon. Real thunder now. A storm finally coming in. Emma walked home slow. Rain always washed things clean. And some things needed to be washed. But Cal Doolin wasn't done. He didn't like being ignored. That night, 2 of his men took a sledgehammer to the hardware store's back window. No one was hurt. No one was inside. But the message was clear. Emma saw the broken glass the next morning. She didn't go to the sheriff. She didn't knock on Cal's door. She did something else entirely. She called a number she hadn't used in years. One that only rang once before answering. This is Grayson, she said. Silence on the line. Then we're listening. I need you, not for war, just presence. How many? 12. When may you want in? She looked at the sky. Tomorrow. Pretty went no more. Across the country, 12 men packed bags. No uniforms, no insignia. Just boots, muscle, brotherhood. Not because they wanted to fight, but because one of their own had finally made the call. And that meant one thing. She'd already waited too long. It was still dark when the first chopper appeared, a low silhouette slicing the early morning sky. The second followed in a wide arc, landing on the open football field just behind the diner. No lights, no sirens. Just the steady rhythm of rotor blades and the soft thud of boots on wet grass. 12 men stepped off. Some older, some young. All cut from the same steel. Not flashy, not loud. No weapons in sight, no introductions. Only the echo of silence and the calm certainty of purpose. The town wasn't awake yet, but something had shifted. Even the birds seemed to hesitate. Sheriff Collins watched from across the field. He didn't ask questions. He only nodded once as the team filed out toward Main Street. Emma was already there, standing in front of the diner, arms crossed. Not in command, in welcome. These weren't reinforcements. They were brothers, and they hadn't come to start a fight. They'd come to end one before it began. Jesse saw them first. He was stepping out of the hardware store, still boarded up, still bruised, when the first SEAL passed him without a glance. Not even a warning, but Jesse felt it. The weight of being measured and dismissed. He flinched anyway. Cal Doolin wasn't so easily rattled. He stood across from the diner boots planted wide, a cigar hanging from the side of his mouth. He watched the men fan out, some leaning against storefronts, others sitting casually at outdoor tables. No formation, no obvious coordination, but somehow they covered everything. Every alley, every angle. It was the kind of presence you didn't notice until it was already surrounding you. Cal squinted. "Friends of yours," he called to Emma. She didn't answer. Cal let the silence hang a little too long. "Looks like you got scared after all." Emma raised an eyebrow. "I asked them here because I'm not scared," she said. "But maybe you should be." He laughed, tried to, but it came out hollow. Outer sermons. The townspeople noticed by noon. A new waitress at the diner nearly dropped a tray when she spotted the man with a trident tattoo sipping coffee like he owned the place. By 2 p.m., there were whispers in the bakery, the school, the gas station. They came for her. They didn't say a word. They just appeared. The bikers didn't move. They'd always controlled the street with noise. Now they were outnumbered by silence. And that silence was far more dangerous. Lily's mother walked her home that day. She didn't usually. But when she passed by the man with the buzz cut holding the school gate open, she paused. He nodded politely. Didn't ask her name. Didn't explain who he was. But the gesture was enough. She held Lily's hand tighter. She'd never felt safer. That evening, the rain finally came. A slow, steady curtain of water washing the streets, dulling the lights, blurring the edges of the world. But the SEALs didn't move. They stood at corners. They sat on benches. They waited, not for action, but for surrender. And that was exactly what began to happen. One by one, the bikers started leaving town. The ones who had just arrived were the first to go. No confrontations, no sirens. Just long stares exchanged under flickering street lamps. It wasn't fear that drove them. It was realization. There are storms you can ride through, and storms you walk away from. This was the latter. Exo. That night, Emma and Colin sat on the porch of the sheriff's office. Neither spoke for a long time. Then he said, "You know this won't be in any report." Emma shrugged. "Good." He looked at her. "You didn't just bring muscle." "No," she said, "I brought memory." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes that's enough." Inside the diner, the SEALs shared no war stories. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't even say Emma's name. But every now and then, one of them would glance her way, and she would nod once. Nothing more. Because sometimes the loudest thank you is silence. In the morning, they left. No handshakes, no goodbyes. Just boots on pavement. Rotors spinning to life. The town stood at a distance watching. No one waved. No one had to. Everyone understood. They weren't just there for Emma. They were there for what she stood for. And for what had almost been forgotten. Until now. The rain didn't stop. It softened the edges of buildings, soaked the cracked sidewalks, turned gravel into mud. But it couldn't wash away what was coming. Cal Doolin sat alone at the corner table of the bar, fingers curled around a glass that hadn't been full in an hour. The others were gone. No more jokes. No more noise. Just the steady drip from a leaky ceiling and the low groan of wind through a warped window pane. He stared at the door like it owed him something. But no one walked through. Across town, Emma stood in front of the diner again. Same boots. Same coat. Only now she wasn't alone. The crosswalk stretched empty in front of her, slick with oil and memory. The same crosswalk where it began. The place where they blocked the way, shouted names, laughed in the face of a child and her mother. But not today. Not anymore. She She didn't need to call Cal. She just started walking. And somehow he knew. The door of the bar swung open. He stepped out into the downpour, cigar unlit, soaked in seconds. No gang behind him. Just a man in a denim vest too proud to take it off. He met her halfway, in the middle of the crosswalk, where things break, or begin again. Endononom, millennium. You think you won, he said, voice graveled from too many late nights and cheap smoke. Emma didn't answer. You brought your boys, flexed your silence, scared off my crew. Still, she said nothing. Cal laughed short and bitter. What now? You gonna cuff me, run me out of town with your Navy buddies? Emma finally looked up. Her eyes weren't angry. They were tired, worn, and steady. I didn't bring them for you, she said. Cal blinked. I brought them for the town, for Lily, for the old man you threatened at the pharmacy, for the girl you cornered behind the gas station. He shifted. His feet sank slightly in the wet gravel. And for me, she added, so I'd remember I wasn't alone. Cal's grin cracked. You want a medal for that? She stepped closer, close enough to smell the rust and rot in his jacket. I don't want anything. Then she said it slowly, measuring every word. I just want you to understand. This is over. When you Cal didn't flinch. Not right away, but something in his jaw shifted. Not defeat, recognition. He looked around. No engines, no backup, no fear in her face. Just him and the rain. You think silence wins, he asked. That being quiet and calm makes you righteous. She shook her head gently. No, but sometimes silence is the loudest kind of power. Behind them across the street, a few neighbors watched from porches and windows. No phones, no recordings, just breath held, hearts caught. Somewhere Lily was watching too, holding her mother's hand, not trembling anymore. Seated at Bronkerville, then Cal did something no one expected. He stepped aside. Just one step, out of the crosswalk, out of the way, and said nothing. Emma walked past him, didn't turn, didn't gloat, and in that moment the rain washed away the last bit of power he held, not because he surrendered, but because she didn't need to fight. An hour later, Cal Doolin packed up. 2 trash bags, 1 duffel. No one helped. No one stopped him. The bar closed early. The streets grew quieter. Not from fear, but from peace. The kind that comes after a storm that finally spent itself. Emma didn't go back to her motel. She stood under the awning of the diner until the rain eased. Then she sat, just a cup of black coffee between her hands. The waitress refilled it once, maybe twice, and the sheriff passed by tipping his hat. Anything you need, he asked. Emma looked out at the street, the empty crosswalk, the still buildings. No, she said softly. I've got everything I came for. For where you're you, Mom. That night, Lily drew a picture. It was simple. Just 2 figures standing in the rain. One tall with a trident on her shoulder. The other smaller holding a stuffed rabbit. Above them was a sentence written in shaky block letters. Thank you for moving the monsters. Suri. Back at the motel, Emma looked at the old photo again, the one of her father in uniform smiling through dust and sun. She didn't cry. She just nodded, like she understood now what he'd always meant when he said, win with grace, protect with silence. Emma stayed for 3 more days, not because she had to, because she wanted to see it through. No more confrontations, no loud headlines, just the gentle kind of change that only shows up in the silences people used to avoid. On the second morning, a man from the hardware store stepped out and swept his sidewalk. He nodded at Emma as she passed. No words, just a nod. That was enough. Anturt. At the diner, Lily brought her the drawing. Folded paper, bright crayon lines, rain falling from a gray sky. Emma unfolded it slowly. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just held it for a long time, like it meant more than anything anyone had said to her in years. Maybe it did. Sir Durmino. By the third morning, the bikers' clubhouse was boarded up. For sale sign in the window. Nobody came to claim the inside. No one touched the rusting bikes in the alley. The town moved on like a bruise that had finally begun to fade. Sir. That afternoon, Emma walked the crosswalk one last time. Not because she needed to, but because she could. No engine noise. No shouting. Just the sound of her boots on wet pavement and the memory of what it meant to take a stand, not with noise, but with stillness. She sat by the river that evening, her phone in her hand. Not texting, not scrolling. Just watching the sun lower across the water the same way her dad used to sit in silence after deployment, like he was making peace with the parts no one else saw. Maybe that's what strength was. Not medals. Not scars. Just choosing how to walk away. Sarita Basurias, Hakidia Rorana concern. A voicemail blinked on her phone. It was from the sheriff. Emma, his voice said low and careful. Thought you should know Lily starts school next week. She's walking alone. Whole damn town's watching her like she's royalty. I think you did that. Thought you should hear it. No need to reply. She didn't. She just saved the message. Creating to your mom. On her final morning, Emma folded the drawing, carefully tucked it between pages of a worn field journal, and zipped it into her pack. The trident tattoo on her shoulder caught the morning light. A reminder of where she'd come from. Not what she fought for, but how she stood when no one else did. She checked out of the motel with a quiet thank you and left no trace behind, except the folded towel with a note written in small block letters. People don't need heroes. They need reminders. Terrar, 2 states away, a man at a gas station watched her bike pull in. He eyed the scars on her gloves, the way she moved, not slow, not fast, just sure. You military, he asked. She didn't answer. Just lifted the gas nozzle. He tried again. Seen you on the news. You that SEAL from the Texas thing. She paused, then shook her head once. No, she said. And that was all. She didn't need the credit. Didn't want the story. But the town would tell it anyway. Not with headlines or cameras, but in the way they taught their kids to stand a little straighter, to speak when it mattered, to be silent when it counted. Durham. In the years that followed, no one painted over the crosswalk, but someone placed a small plaque near the curb. It wasn't fancy, just 3 lines. For those who protect, for those who stand, for those who never needed to shout. And if you pass through that town one quiet afternoon, you might see a little girl point at the curb and whisper, "That's where she stopped the monsters." And someone might ask, "Who?" And the little girl would shrug and say, "She never said." If this story moved you, take a moment. Think of someone who stood up when it was hard, someone who didn't need noise to be powerful. Share this story with them, or become that someone yourself.